Hi everyone, welcome back to this edition of In the Studio. Today's video is a follow-up to our Khaliji-style video. In that previous video, we did an introduction to the Khaliji rhythm as played on a solo frame drum and some different stylistic techniques that you could apply to that. Today's video is going to be a Khaliji-style ensemble recording. We're going to take several different percussion instruments, as you can see here, and we're going to layer them to create how you would accompany a Khaliji-style song using an ensemble of musicians. If you haven't done so already, please reach down and subscribe to the channel. And remember to like and share this video. If you're so inspired, please put a comment down. I do read the comments and I look for subjects to approach in future videos. So if you have an idea of a particular subject, a question that you have, put that down into the comments, as I want to be sure to address each of those things in future videos. But without further ado, let's get into an ensemble recording of the Khaliji style. So the first rule of thumb to remember when we're approaching percussion ensemble, and this is a general rule of thumb in any style of music, is that the more percussionists that you have playing all at the same time, the fewer notes each of them should be playing. Otherwise, the texture gets too muddied and cluttered. You can't really hear the subtlety and the nuance of everyone else's individual parts throughout. So if you remember from our previous video, we spent a lot of time developing techniques to enhance the texture, right? Talking about different left-hand articulations, different ornaments that you can put on. Today, all of that ornamentation is going to be left out, and it's left out intentionally because we're going to be applying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different layers of drums along with 3 distinct Palmis parts, hand clap parts. So when you have that much material going on at once, there really isn't any room for ornamentation. So keep this in mind when you're approaching accompaniment with a section of percussionists, that you can't play as many notes as you would as a soloist. Okay. When we start to build these layers up, we're going to take a slightly different approach today than we did in the previous video. We're going to use a couple of different basic patterns. All right, so the format for today, we have 2 basic rhythms on our lead drum. Today's lead instrument is going to be our Darbukah. And then we have 2 accompaniment patterns within the hand claps that are going to go along with that. All right, the other drums are going to each play their own pattern, but it's not going to alternate. So the lead drum, Darbukah, will alternate between these 2 patterns. The hand clap parts will also alternate depending on what the lead drum asks them to do. The other instruments will play their own basic pattern. So let's start with an introduction of what some of these basic patterns are. I'm going to begin with this big guy. Of course, you guys know this is a djembe. And a djembe is not a traditional Arabic instrument. And that's okay. We're not going to be playing traditional djembe patterns on this. Instead, we're going to use the tone of this instrument and we're going to apply it into our Khaliji style. All right, the pattern that we're going to play is really quite simple, and we're just going to use the same technique that we would use on a Darbukah, with one exception, and that is that I'm going to bring my palm into the center of the drum, because I really want that bass voice to speak and resonate inside the room, and I want to capture that onto my recording. The pattern that we're going to play, think of it as 4 quarter notes, using a bass tone, my edge tone, slap, back to the edge. So it'll sound something like this. Simple. Simple stuff. We want to hear that nice bass tone ring out. All right. Bass tones in percussion are not a typical feature within Arabic drumming, but I liked this texture so much, it sounded really good today. All right. So we're going to add it into our texture. I think it's a nice voice to add to that. along with this voice, we're going to double that exact same part on this very unique instrument. This is made by Schlagwerk Percussion. As you guys know, I'm an artist endorsee with Schlagwerk. This is called their Cajabukah, which is their Darbukah cajon. So this is an all wooden instrument, including the head, also made of wood. And as you can hear, there's some snares inside of that. And it makes a very interesting tone, especially with your left hand ka sound. I'm going to play the exact same pattern that I had on the djembe. I'm going to play it on this. Okay. Now you'll notice I'm not filling in with the left hand. I could. But remember that rule. The more instruments that we're adding into the texture, the fewer notes each individual instrument should be playing. If every instrument was coloring and filling in every eighth note and adding embellishments and nice finger frills, etc., etc., if we were to add that on every single instrument, it would become so dense that we couldn't hear through the parts. And that's really what we're looking for within an ensemble context like this. We want to be able to hear the transparency through all the instruments, each one of them individually. So these two instruments are going to double on the exact same part. Now, the next instrument we're going to add is bongo. Now, in the 1960s and into the 1970s, there was something of a cultural thaw taking place really everywhere around the world, but especially in the Middle East. Things were beginning to open up a little bit. In many parts of the Middle East, music was being embraced more as a cultural expression and then being exported to other parts in the world. And as a result, they were open to some more influence. And the bongo actually became a mainstay instrument in groups, backing up singers like Kulthum and Khalim Hafez and Warshda and all of these other very famous singers from this era, the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, and especially in the group with Kulthum, who was one of the biggest Middle Eastern stars of all time. Now, in her band, for the longest time, there was really just two percussion instruments, and it was bongo and the Riqq, the tambourine. There was no Darbukah. All right, that didn't come around until the 1970s when they began to make the Darbukah out of aluminum instead of clay. When it was made out of aluminum with the plastic head, the timbre, the tone of the instrument was significant enough that that began to overtake some of the previous instruments within the percussion section. So as you listen to recordings in a historical timeline, you'll start to hear the progression of the percussion sections. Now, one of the unique features of the Khaliji style, what we're going to use the bongo for, are its syncopations, all right? Not every drum is going to be playing an identical pattern, and so the pattern that we're going to play here on the bongo is quite unique, all right? And we're going to enhance and feature these syncopations. The pattern that we're going to play this time here, there's a couple of variations in that depending on what I'm hearing inside the rest of the context. I'll move back and forth in those patterns. These are not fixed patterns, all right? You can create a little bit of alteration here or there, but these supporting drums, they're not solo instruments, so don't treat them as one. You'll often see a lot of people playing the bongo in this upward position. And sometimes that's preferable to get the instrument to speak up above the texture of the band a little bit. Okay? So as you can see, I'm not playing traditional patterns. right? I'm not even using traditional technique on this instrument. I'm literally just taking the timbre, treating this just as a drum, not as a bongo, as a drum, and adding that into this Khaliji texture that we're creating, okay? So the next instrument that we're going to add into this texture is going to be the frame drum. And the frame drum's unique when we're building a percussion section in a group. The Takht ensemble will only have 2 percussionists maximum, typically Darbukah and then the tambourine. When that ensemble begins to enlarge a little bit and we start getting into a fuller orchestra setting, we're going to add additional percussionists, but we're not going to add more Darbukah or more Riqq. There's only one person on each of these instruments, so we start to add additional frame drums to start making that foundational sound, all right? What we're going to do in today's recording of this Khaliji ensemble that we're creating is I'm going to double the basic pattern of the Darbukah on this particular instrument, okay? So that first pattern that we'll play, okay, and I can alternate. I can either use a pop sound like this or my tuck on the edge of the instrument. Either one of those is okay to use. Before I talk about the tambourine, that's my last layer to put on here, as well as the Darbukah. Let's talk a little bit about the hand clap patterns. As I said at the beginning of the video, we're going to have 3 parts, all right, but 2 sections. In the first section, which is the basic, all 3 hand clap parts are in unison. And that's just a big clap on beat 1. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Very simple. It's part 2 that starts to get pretty interesting. All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. In this second section of the hand claps, we have 3 individual layers that are all going to create a composite Palmis rhythm, a composite hand clap pattern, right? Part 1 is straight quarter notes. Very simple. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? This is part 1. Part 2, I'm going to place these on the offbeats, all on the ends, right? So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So now if I were to put those 2 together, I'd get well, that's actually kind of a workout if you're going to clap straight 8th notes. But remember, in these ensembles, we're talking about as many as 15 to 20 people only playing hand clap parts, right? And there's sort of a loose organization. How many people will play part 1, how many people to play part 2, how many people to play part 3. But as you're going to see, part 3 is much more involved, okay? Part 3 is going to work like this. You're going to clap on the end of 1, the downbeat of 2, and then the of 2 as a 16th note anticipation into beat 3. And that's going to go twice per measure. So end of 1, 2, of 2, followed by the end of 3, downbeat of 4, and the of 4. So it'll sound like this. 2, 3, 4. 1. When these 3 parts become superimposed upon one another, what you hear then is a rhythm: 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4. And this type of syncopation, this is what makes Khaliji so hip. It is a polyphonic hand clap pattern. 3 different parts. Again, these parts can be doubled by as many different clapping members of the ensemble as you have people available. I would recommend, however, with the third part, the syncopated part, that you put people who are really confident with their rhythm on there, because you want that to really swing. You really want that part to lock. So let's take a minute and talk about the Darbukah. The Darbukah is, we're going to treat this as our lead instrument here. This is going to serve two functions, okay? One is to interact and lead the drum ensemble from one section into the next. And I'll do that by playing some calls or setting up the ensemble to play a call together. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But the other thing that it does is it will serve as the lead voice in a call and response section. And this is something of an optional section. It can be very cool to do this inside a Khaliji song, is to put in a call and response type of section. And we're going to do that here. And I always am going to announce these calls using a nice crisp pop, okay? So the basic patterns that I have on here, I've already demonstrated on the frame drum, but to go over one more time, the basic pattern, section 1, is okay? Because this is the lead drum, and because this does have a sharper texture that can get up above the texture of the rest of the instruments, you can add in some of your left hand ornamentation, okay? But I wouldn't go overboard. Remember that rule. The more drums that we have going on, the less that each person should be playing. So remember that, it will serve you well. The second pattern to this, one more time, 2, 3, and... okay? Again, this slow, laid-back Karachi. And in this particular demonstration today, I'm not going to be using a lot of my edge tone, okay? I'm really going to be focused on the pops, all right? And when we get to that call and response section, I'll do the same thing. I'll start off with a pop. And then you'll hear the clap section clap that rhythm back to me, right? Very simple stuff. So the structure of our composition, you'll see in the annotations as we go by, is going to start out with a 4-bar Darbukah introduction, followed by the Doholla voice coming in, which is, again, our Djembe, and our interesting Cajabukah drum will come in at the same time, and I'll also bring in the frame drum in that same moment. The next layer to be added after that will be our Bongo, that syncopated offbeat 8th note pattern, which is so interesting. And then I'll bring in the Riqq, followed by the clapping, okay? And then all we're going to do is toggle back and forth between rhythm number 1 for 8 bars and rhythm number 2 for 8 bars. The Palmis section, the syncopated section for the hand claps, will play it once over the first drum texture, section 1, and then we'll play it again over the second. So I've saved my personal favorite layer for last, and that is the Riqq, the Arabic tambourine. I've spent a very large part of my career playing on this instrument in various different ensembles, most notably a group called Mesto, based here in Los Angeles. I was principal percussionist of this group for 13 or 14 years. And what a satisfying feeling to lead an ensemble as a drum set player, but with the tambourine in your hand. That's sort of what it felt like. And it gives you something of an idea of what the role the Riqq plays in an ensemble, whether it's a percussion ensemble, tacht ensemble, larger orchestra, etc., etc. The Riqq is, in my opinion, the most important instrument in the percussion section and in the ensemble, simply because it has the ability to leap and move around and interact with all the different melodic instruments that are happening. It will often shadow the singer, shadow the oud player, shadow any of the string instruments, etc., moving in and out of patterns. It is not bound to the Riqq the way that many of the other instruments are. And the very fact that it has jingles allows it to hover up and above the texture very, very clearly. So the role that this is going to play within our Khaliji ensemble is going to be a little bit subdued, okay? But there is going to be some dancing and some freedom within this as well. And so the basic pattern that we're going to play on this, very quite simple, primarily just 4 quarter notes, okay? Easy. I am going to switch into 8th notes every once in a while. And then I'm also going to add in backbeat figures. And this is very, very hip. And then I'm going to improvise. And for the improvisation, I'm just going to let my ear take me wherever it goes. Beautiful. And with that, our Khaliji ensemble is complete. So I want to thank you again for stopping by. Hope that you learned something. Please put your questions and your requests down in the comments section for future editions of In the Studio. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, it really helps me out as I try to build this channel and spread as much knowledge about drums and percussion around the world as I possibly can. Until next time, everybody, happy drumming. If you liked this video and want to see more like it, please hit the subscribe button. Visit my website for more information on tours, upcoming performances, and updates on all my projects. Thanks so much, and don't forget to share this video.